In this presentation, I would like to take a look at how to install the piston in your Honda GC series engine. So before we move on, let's take a look at the expectations for this lab. Number one, make sure your valves are installed and that all appropriate signatures have been obtained and that paperwork has been turned in. You're going to orient the piston rings at about 120-degree angles. So think a Y. All right, if I put 3 dots equally spaced on this piston, but do not line up any piston ring end gaps with the clip holes for the wrist pin on the side of the piston. Service manual is very specific about that because it can result in oil consumption and a loss of power. Do not align the ring gaps with each other. So again, we want to have those staggered enough. I think there's about a 10-degree stagger specified in the oil control ring end gap. So we can actually do that essentially on the same side of the piston and be just fine. Again, make sure we're avoiding the wrist pin hole. We will not be measuring piston ring end gap on this engine. As you can see here, it's simply installing a piston ring without the piston and measuring the gap in it. So mine is 0.0015, which is well within the specification of Honda's rings when they are brand new. I believe the service limit is 0.04, 4 thousandths, I think. I would have to go back and look. Either way is a lot as those piston rings wear. So let's go ahead and install the piston into our engine. First things first, we're going to want to apply a coating of oil on the side of the piston and into the ring lands. So that way we'll have our initial lubrication just like such. And then we will also want to apply a couple of drops of oil to the cylinder wall. I simply take my fingers and smear that around. That will be the initial lubrication for the engine once we start it. So to orient the piston rings, which is the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to put this ring gap right here at, probably the 1 o'clock or so position. I'm going to move the ring gap. It's almost like dialing the combination in your locker. I'm going to put that one at about the 11 o'clock position. And then I'm going to put the ring gaps for the oil control as soon as I find one. Here's one. Just going to move that real quick. So there's the top one. Hopefully you can see that. And there's the bottom one. Make sure that that's pushed in. And that should suffice for setting the ring gap up correctly. I'm going to move this top one in just a little bit more, like such, so that it's well away from the wrist pin hole on either side. At this point, what I'm going to do is install the piston. I'm going to tip it like in this orientation, which is going to push the piston rings up toward the top, and you can kind of feel it wanting to slide into the cylinder. Then I'm simply going to use my fingers to very gently wiggle that piston in. Now I'm using my fingers on the bottom to help guide the piston rings into the cylinder as well, and making sure that they don't pop out of the ring lands on the piston. Very gentle pressure, some wiggling. If they don't want to go, pull the piston back, make your adjustment. You can see on this, we got one that popped out, and simply try again. This can be a somewhat frustrating part. I don't like using a ring compressor because they just don't seem to fit very well in the space that they give us and the style that these engines are. So once you've got that done, go ahead and push the piston all the way up into the top of the bore. This has been a look at how to install the piston in your Honda GC series engine.